Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here with your women here at the Valley Church. I thank you guys so much for inviting me in to be a part of the party. Uh, I'm just amazed at what God is doing with this little book. I call it the little engine that could. I am being inboxed from people all over the globe just sharing, I needed to hear this, and your rebound is going to help me make my rebound. So I'm just delighted to see what God is doing. It just shows when we give ourselves over wholly to God, He can take it, whatever little bit it is, and do incredible things with it. Anyway, women, I have a lot to share, so I don't want to waste much time. Give me a moment to go to God in prayer, and then we'll jump right in. Heavenly Father, thank you so much, God. Father, I just want to pause, take this time, center, and allow you, Father, to flow through me. God, I pray that this is a time, God, in which you can speak clearly. Your voice will be heard over my voice or over the voices of all others. God, I pray that we can truly just sit at your feet and listen and learn. God, it's so easy when we are virtual to try and do 5 or 6 different things at a time. But God, I pray that today, for the next hour or so, we will pause and give you our undivided attention. Help us, God, to hear you. Open up our ears, open up our hearts, open up our minds. God, I pray that the words that come out are the words that you want said. And Father, I pray that you would take all those words and you would spread it amongst all of these women so that each woman hears your voice. God, I love you and I praise you. I give great thanks in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, ladies. So we're talking about rebound. And we're going to start with just really embracing your story, because really rebounding is embracing your story. But I want to introduce you to my family. They are they are the engine behind me. And I know Jennifer introduced them, but I want to introduce you personally. This is my husband, Kai. He leads the Greater Reno Church here in Reno, Nevada. And then I have my 2 incredible children. You have my son, Cole, who in this picture, he's smiling. That's rare, but it happens. You might witness that every now and then he does smile. And then there's my beautiful daughter, Mason, and she's on the line with us. So hello, Mason. It's good to have you here, sweetie. But they are the ones, they are the reason why I had to rebound. I could no longer stay in the condition that I was in. You know, it's really wild because in writing it, it's very therapeutic, but it's also cathartic. You know, you're writing, you're churning all this stuff up. And there were many times I'd be praying, okay, God, are you sure you want me to say this? God, you sure about this? And just when I got ready to send off that last chapter and press send, I was so nervous and in prayer. And I hit that send button and my husband said, babe, I haven't seen you like this since we left LA. Now, at first I got upset. I was like, what do you mean you haven't seen me like this since we left LA? But, you know, that's me. I get an attitude first and then I bounce back. But he was right. I had to take it in because what that meant, because we left LA 20 years ago. What he was saying is, I haven't seen you this free in 20 years. And I thought about these 2 beautiful faces that you see on the screen. My son is 22, my daughter is 24. That means for the majority of their lifetime, my kids have never seen me completely free. I had to rebound. So they are truly the engine behind me. And then I want to introduce you also to my extended family. They are the kids that I work with. And I know Jennifer mentioned it. I work with the homeless population here in Reno, Nevada. These are the families that are most marginalized. They are the ones that are invisible. They're the ones that we see on the street corners, but we choose not to see. They have children, and those kids have to be in school. There was a poem written, and this really sums up my kids. And it's called, "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil." And it says, I woke myself up because we ain't got no alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket, 'cause ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark, 'cause the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready, 'cause my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed, 'cause I ain't got no pencil. You get a chance to see the burden, what these kids are walking around with, but also the indifference of others standing side by side with them. So when these kids walk into my office, they come in hungry, dirty, scared, insecure, desperate, embarrassed. And they're hoping against all odds that I'm going to make them feel safe, that I'm going to make them feel free and adored and loved, and most of all, seen. So you can say, BJ, what does it have to do with us and what we're talking about today? This is the exact condition I believe so many of us as Christians sit in. Now, we camouflage it better. These kids, they don't have the coping mechanism, the coping skills, but we can dress it up. We can make things look good when inside they are not good. How do I know that? Because I did for such a long time. So I took the liberty to rewrite this poem based on some of what I felt, but also based on different people I've spoken to. And the title of this one is called I Ain't Got No Fight Left. It says, I drug myself to church this morning because I ain't got nowhere else to turn. Dust off my Bible because I desperately need something to hold on to. Brushed my hair and teeth, but inside, the lights ain't on. Put a smile on my face because that's the Christian thing to do. Even greeted people at the door because I got church responsibilities. Then when I got inside and the people fussed because I ain't got no fight left. Sisters, I don't know about you. I have been this person. There are times I felt all of that. And then other times, maybe just bits and pieces of it. And along the way, I blamed other people for why I felt what I was feeling. And during my time with God, this churning, this was an 8-month journey writing this book. But during this time, what God brought me to was, BJ, your rebound doesn't depend on everybody else. Your rebound begins with you. And he asked me this infamous question, which all of us know, do you want to get well? And when I first read that, I was like, oh, Jesus, please, get a grip. That's a hard question. It's a stupid question to ask. Do I want to get well? Of course I want to get well. But the more I dug into it, the more I realized that is not necessarily the answer. God has been asking me for a long time, do you want to get well? And there are times I simply didn't answer the question. So what I had to do then, if I was going to truly get well, once my answer was, yes, Lord, I want to get well, this is what he brought me to. And I tried to lay this out in a 1, 2, 3 for the sake of this class today. But I want you to know it's not as simple as 1, 2, 3. It's one thing that's really hard, 2 things that's really hard, and 3 things that's really hard. But if we do them, it truly will turn your life around. The first step, which I thought was the hardest, was assessing the damage and reconciling the pain. I had to be willing to go into those places where I hurt the most. Let me see, what condition am I in? And I called it, if you have the scenes in my life story, I went back and there are certain scenes that I had literally ripped out the pages. I went, ooh, I didn't like that. That was ugly. Ooh, that was painful. So there are things that I'd ripped out of my life story, balled it up, threw it in the trash. But what God revealed to me was, BJ, it is not your story. You don't have the authority to take things out of your story. My story is just a small piece in his story. And everything that he has me going through is for a reason. So I have to go back and reclaim those things. And I wasn't happy about it because that meant walking into pain. And this is what I want to show us. I want to use a very familiar person today. I want to talk about Moses. Moses is one of those, we all kind of know him. He's the Red Sea guy. He's the burning bush guy. So whether you're churched or unchurched, we tend to know who Moses is. But there's a lesson I believe that we've missed with Moses. We find Moses in Exodus 3, running from his past. That's what I was doing. I was running away from all those scenes that I mentioned that I was ripping at. I was running away from them. And we find Moses in this same state. But along the way, he runs into his destiny. Exodus 3, 1 through 6. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Excuse me. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire, appeared from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, hey, I'll go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said to them, I am the Lord of your God, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Girls, I look at this. We are so enamored with the burning bush. I always tell my women here, I believe Satan's greatest ploy is that he gets us to focus on the secondary rather than the primary. The burning bush was there to get his attention, but the lesson wasn't the burning bush. The lesson was surrounding it. But we can get caught up in the burning bush that we miss it. So I want us to go back and look at something. God presented the burning bush to get his attention. And then in verse 4, when the Lord saw, and I circled that word, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him. God did something powerful in Moses' life. And then he stood back and watched to see if Moses was going to respond. Then he directed him. I look at what's going on with us. God has done powerful things in all of our lives. And at times he stood back to see, are you going to respond? BJ, what are you going to do? Are you going to run away? Are you going to ignore me? Or are you going to respond? 2020, the world shut down. God did something powerful in our lives. But if we look at it, how did we as a nation, honestly, respond? We cried about it. We ignored it. We cried, foul, this is not right. We've done everything except acknowledge God and wait for him to answer. That's what's going on here. When Moses finally walked over, God called him to something. And look at what he called him to. In verse 5, he says, do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I looked at that one. What? He's out with the sheep. That means it's dirty, it's dusty, it's probably stinky. And God is saying this is holy ground. What makes it holy? The fact that God is there. So I had to look at that and go, okay, God. So the dusty, stinky, nasty places of my life that I've ripped out because I didn't want to look upon them anymore. You're telling me that if you're there, it's holy ground. God was saying yes. I had to go back into those dirty, dusty, stinky places and find the hand of God. What God showed me during that time was if you curse the way that God leads you, you'll never reach the place where he's trying to take you to. All those things that I'd ripped out of my life story, I cursed the way God was leading me. God, why are you taking me down this road? I don't like this road. This road is scary. This road is dark. And he's saying, BJ, if you curse the way I lead you, you'll never be able to go where I'm trying to take you. And it made me think, when I had a miscarriage many years ago. It was my very first child. When I had my miscarriage, I was devastated. It was my one dream, my one desire, my big hope was just simply to be a mom. And when all of a sudden I started to cramp and I started to bleed, I got angry. I was like, no, God, we did not agree upon this. This is not how this is supposed to go down. And I just remember the ride there, my husband's talking, trying to calm me down. I wasn't listening because I was in an internal battle with God. I was demanding, I was manipulating, I was maneuvering, I was pleading. God, I serve your people. I've done everything you've asked me to do. And now you take away my dream? I'm angry. And I remember getting to the waiting room, the emergency room, and it felt like it was just chocked full of people. And I felt I was waiting forever. And I remember getting into the room. Finally, the doctor comes in and he does this little quick examination and leaves. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And as I'm waiting, the bleeding is getting worse. The cramping is getting worse. The clotting is starting to happen. I knew in my heart what was happening, but I refused the answer. God, you owe me. God, we didn't agree upon this. And then I hear on the other side of the curtain, the doctor didn't come in. I just heard him on the other side of the curtain speaking to a nurse. He said, we need this room. We need this room. Just get her cleaned up. She's had a miscarriage, but we need this room. And that's how I found out I lost my baby. I was devastated. And for a long time, I was angry. I was hurt and I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at this doctor for being so callous. And even though I was able to go on, have two beautiful, healthy kids, every time I rubbed up against that place in my life, the pain was still there. So God said, BJ, you need to go back. We need to go back into those places that hurt. And this time, you need to find me. So I go back as I'm combing through the pains of my life. And I saw something I didn't see before. I hear the doctor having this conversation with this nurse and walk away. And then in walks an angel. This woman walked in and she was a dark chocolate, just like me. She was round, just like me. And she had this southern baked accent, just like me. And she patted me on my leg and she said, baby, God must love you an awful lot. You know, at this point, those cells are splitting so quickly. Some didn't connect the way that he wanted it to. And he's got different plans for you. Go ahead, get dressed. She patted me on my leg, said, you're going to be all right, and walked out the door. I had never seen this woman before, and I've never seen her since. But I now know God showed up for me. He showed up in a form in which I needed. She could have been my grandmother, a grandmother embracing a hurting girl who had just lost her child. But because I was so angry, I was so busy looking at the other circumstances, I missed God. I had to go back, assess the damage, see how much pain was really there, and I had to reconcile the pain by coming face to face with a loving God, not a hurting, evil, mean God. You know, I was with one of my sisters here in the church on yesterday, and she was sharing with me a story, and I said, can I share that tomorrow? And she said, oh yeah, please. But she was sharing with me that at the age of 5, she experienced the murder of her mom. And she said, I heard all the yelling and the screaming, the fighting that was going on. And then silence. She said, for 20 years, I was angry at God. How can you say that you are a loving God and let a 5-year-old experience this? How can you say that I am a father and I am a mother to the homeless? How can you? She said, for 20 years, I was angry. And it wasn't until I dug into my family and I realized how messed up things were and that God removing my mom allowed all these kids to be safely tucked under grandma who raised them. God was protecting us. At the time, she didn't know it. So it remained a place of deep hurt and a wound until she went back into it and found the hand of God. You know, a friend of mine, he has a saying that your sufferings are the breadcrumbs leading to your destiny. We've got to be willing to walk back into the suffering. Follow the breadcrumbs of your suffering because God is trying to lead us somewhere. As you go through my book, basically all you're doing is walking with me through my suffering and gleaning the lessons that I got from it. My mom used to always say, baby, nothing's ever wasted. God is saying, nothing you've been through is ever wasted. So we have to stop ripping pages out of our story. We have to allow ourselves to embrace, to own our own story. Now, what I'm asking you to do is terrifying. I'm just going to be real. It's terrifying, it's painful, it's hard. And that's why step number 2 is so important. Please don't try to do it by yourself. You've got to find your inner circle. The Truth Squad. In the book, I called it Operation Rescue BJ. And I'm going to use another familiar passage here in Ruth. It says, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. And may the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, we will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have more sons that you could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. This is so poetic. This is one of those passages it just makes us feel warm inside. And we all go, oh, I want to be Ruth. But you know what? We miss the other half of that story. Naomi teaches us something incredibly powerful, I believe, here, that we never ever talk about. We see the connection with Ruth and Naomi, but Naomi also had the same connection with Orpah. When it was time to go, she cried over her. It broke her heart. But when Orpah decided to go, Naomi let her go. And I say it that way because women, especially us, we hold on to people that are trying to walk away. I heard a saying that if someone can walk out of your life, let them go. They're not tied to the next tier of your destiny. Orpah was not tied to the next part of the destiny. Ruth was. So I looked at this and God showed me there's 3 different categories of relationships. When we get them mixed up is when we get in trouble. Again, we're looking for our inner circle. We're not looking for just friends, any friends. Who's going to dive into the deep waters with me if I'm drowning? Who will that be? So we have first the confidant. The confidants are the people in your life that love you unconditionally. They are intertwined with your destiny. You only have a few of them in your lifetime. You cannot be David until you've met your Jonathan or your Ruth without your Naomi. They're intertwined. And then we have the constituents. The constituents, kind of like politics, they are not into you. They are into what you are for. They are in your life for a cause, not for companionship. So if I'm for Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, I can find a lot of other moms in that same category, and we will stand united together. But if I'm drowning, it doesn't mean they're going in the water with me. And that's okay, because they play a different role in my life. And lastly, we have our comrades. Think military. They are against what you are against. They will team up with you to help fight a greater enemy, but will only be with you until the victory is accomplished. God also brought them into your life, but he brought them into your life not to stay with you, but to fight with you. So I can look at this person and let them go and say, thank you for fighting with me, for being on my side when I needed that fight. Now it's over. I can let this person go. Naomi did not let Oprah go with bitterness and anger and resentment and hurt feelings. She let her go because she knew that her time was done. And I think for us, we have to take a look at ourselves, and we've got to stop holding people hostage to what we want them to be in our lives. God really does determine where he's taking us next, and therefore who we need in our life. Here's an example, and then we're going to pause part one. I have a good friend. I have a friend in my life right now, and it's always baffled people's mind why we're friends. She can be a little coarse. She is straight to the point, and she will speak her mind. And when everyone else is going, I just love it, BJ. I love when BJ preaches. I love to hear BJ sing. I love, and she'll go, now I like the other BJ. When the first time I heard that, I was like, dang, you got to be so harsh about that? She'll go, yeah, I like the other BJ. It's like, okay. One time she went as far as to say, you know you're emotionally constipated, right? I was like, what? Who are you? Do you know who I am? She has no qualms about speaking the truth. What she sees, what she saw, was that there was a politically correct BJ, and then there was a freer BJ who actually spoke what was on her heart. But she didn't come out very often. So every time she would say, I like the other BJ, what she brought me to was that there was a part of me I was covering up. God brought her into my life because she pricks that part of me that no one else pricked. God was trying to move BJ to the next tier, the next part of her destiny. And in order for her to get there, she had to get honest. She had to get real. She had to pull down the facade. When everybody else is applauding the facade, excuse me, it's very easy to wrap yourself up in it. But then I have this one person who's always pulling back the curtain, pulling back the curtain. Who has God put in your life to show you that part of you that maybe you don't want to see? You've got to circle up your support team that's going to be honest with you, that's going to push you, because God is pushing them to push you to your next level. So again, sisters, just to wrap it all up, part one, we have to assess the damage, reconcile the pain, and surround ourselves with relationships that are going to help us. Anyway, I think we're going to pause here. We're going to go into question and answers. So Jennifer, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing. And BJ, incredible part one. Wow. This is just part one, and part two is coming up. But this is a time for question and answer. And wow, just the things that you shared already, to be brave enough to look for God in those scary places. BJ, I was just writing away in my journal here, and that God is orchestrating everything in our lives because he loves us, and to follow those breadcrumbs of suffering, and it will lead us to our destiny. But we got to be willing to go to those scary places and reclaim the good. So thank you so much for sharing that. And so we've got some questions coming in the chat. Teresa, can you help us out here? What do we got?
Yes, we got a lot of questions coming. Great. Okay, one question I have for you is, what does it look like to allow Jesus into the young, hurting places in our hearts so we can be healed and set free?
What does it look like? It's more of what does it feel like, if I can be honest. I don't know about you, but most of us, I think we walk around and we are tense because we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And I had to admit that my shoulders were not large enough to carry the weight of the world. So I had to hand that over to someone. And what that feels like is to truly, in my book, I talk about not being able to swim and learning to float. Everybody kept saying, just let go, stop holding yourself. I'm like, I don't know what that feels like. But spiritually, it's the same thing. It's going, in this moment, this one small piece, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm just going to lay back and let it go. And you will have moments in which you're going to, because that's our natural instinct. It's like, let me save myself. And then you go back again and you let it go. It's like the breathing prayer. I forget who was doing it first thing this morning. It's breathing. I talk about not being able to breathe. It's learning how to breathe again. I was always known, people used to always say, nobody perseveres like BJ. And I wore that as a banner of pride. Nobody perseveres like me. Until I realized I wasn't persevering. I was holding my breath. That's what God showed me. So it's a matter of what does it feel like? So gather up those small moments of tiny surrender. And the more you do it in little bits and pieces, the more you want. And then you find yourself surrendering more and more and more. And what it is God carrying you. So hopefully that's an answer to that.
Thank you for sharing that. I can go ahead and read from the chat, Teresa.
Okay.
So here it says, why do you think it's hard for women to let go of relationships? And there's a sense of guilt when we lose friendships.
Well, I think part of it is we think we won't find another. We don't like being alone. We're terrified to some degree of being alone. Some of us will admit it. Others of us, like myself, I'm the tough girl. I got this. I don't need nobody. I'm fine. But inside, you're hurting. So I think because of that, when we have a fun or a close relationship in our lives, we want it to stay. But it's almost like you hold on to it so tightly that you're snuffing out the life of the other person. And what I'm saying is allowing God to determine who your relationships are, as opposed to us trying to determine it. I mentioned in the book, as a leader, I always thought, well, my friends are all going to be other leaders. And to some degree, some are, but not all. But if I held on to that mindset, I would dismiss a lot of other people, like my crazy friend I mentioned, that God was bringing into my life, But I had to make room for her by letting go of some others. And it wasn't a matter of one's better than. It's who is God using to shepherd you into the next phase of your life.
Makes sense. Thank you. All right. Another one is, how do you go back, from Alejandra, how do you go back to those places and resolve feelings toward others? Do you have a conversation about the past with those people, or just resolve within yourself somehow?
Alejandra, thank you. Great, great question. You know what it is? I learned that once I went back and I reconciled the pain with God, it released the pain with me.
Mm.
So it was less about the pain. I had pain towards people because I was blaming them for where I was, what I was feeling. But when I could trace it back to, no, 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 that was the hand of God. He may have used those people to bring it about, but that was God. So either I'm angry at God and I have to accept that. And that, again, is part of the pain of it is, as Christians, as believers, we've been trained not to be angry at God.
Mm.
I had to get real with myself and go, God, I'm mad at you. God, I'm disappointed in you. God, I'm frustrated with you. And that's when God said, baby girl, there you are. Now, let's reconcile that. But until I came clean with it, my anger, my pain, and my frustration always had a face attached to it. It's easy to attach that pain to someone we can see. So going back to try to answer that question, sometimes it is a matter of a conversation, but I don't have that conversation until I reconcile with God. Because then that conversation is more, I'm sorry that I held you hostage to my feelings. It hurt me. I wish it had been different. God used you to propel me. And for that, thank you. There's a freedom in there.
Wow. Thank you for that, BJ. So reconciling with God first is what I'm hearing. All right. I have another question from Courtney. What do we do when we go back to our past, our dark places? And how practically do we reclaim these moments?
You know, it's very intentional. Intentional became my word. As I was working through this, is
Mm.
I need to be very intentional. A rebound doesn't just happen, and you're going to see that in the next half of our lesson. It doesn't just happen. You have to be very intentional about it. So in going back, I literally, I thought about, I have a scar on my hand from years ago, washing dishes in a glass. But no matter how many times I press against it or bump against it, I feel nothing because it's completely healed. So I think about if somebody brushes up against me or brushes up against some part of me and it causes pain, that tells me I've not healed. So that's how I determined what areas I needed to go back to. When I would talk with a sister who had a miscarriage, there was a part of my heart hurt. Not just sad for her, but there was a part of my heart. So I had to go back and find out why.
Mm.
I had to go find God in it. I talk about my divorce, my first marriage, and there's a part of me that hurt when I would bump up against. So I had to go back and find why. So that's how I determined which scenes of my life needed my attention. And then when I went back, I specifically prayed, God, help me see your face, your hand of God. I believe that God's hand is in everything, but I believe we miss it most of the time. So God, as I go back, don't let me miss your hand. I just kept saying, don't let me miss your hand. And it started showing himself, as he always does.
That's powerful. Thank you so much, BJ. Wow. All right. This isn't over. We got part two. All right, BJ, I'm going to let you continue, and we have another section for Q&A. So get ready for that. Jot down your questions as BJ shares. I give you BJ for part two.
All right, ladies. All right, part two is the core. And everything I talked about in that first part, it is painful, it's scary. It's hard to deliberately, intentionally walk into. So we have to look at, okay, then how can I be prepared for this? And I put down on the screen here, your core is more than your abs. And I say that jokingly, but honestly, if you look at any magazine stand, the magazines that sell the most are the ones that have the six-pack abs, because we all want them, right? We're all like, ooh, I want to. But spiritually, your spiritual core is more than your faith. And that I had to learn. And that can sound sacrilegious. You're like, whoa, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And hold on to that. So don't let me lose you yet. Your spiritual core is indeed more than your faith. So I want us to go back and look at our guy, Moses. Well, before we go there, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. 2 Peter 1, 3 through 11. I'm just going to pick it up here in the middle, which is verse 5, because he talks about the divine power of God. In verse 5, it says, for this very reason, make every effort to add, circle that word, add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they would keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But if anyone does not have them, he is nearsighted and blind and has forgotten that he has been cleansed from his past sins. In other words, he's desperately in need of a rebound. So what this shows me is that faith is where we start. It is not the end. And I talk about in the book, I kept trying to make this giant leap from faith to love, because all my life I had been taught that my faith alone would sustain me. But I looked at it and I went, wait a minute, God, what are you trying to show me? Our faith being the abs, that cute six-pack part of walking with God, your abs is what strengthens you and it allows you to move forward. But so often in our lives, Satan attacks us from the back or from the side. So we've got to look at our whole core, not just the abs of faith, our whole core. There are 35 muscles that are all tied into building our physical core. It is the support system that keeps us standing firm, standing strong. So if we think spiritually the same way, that means we need all of this. We need goodness and knowledge and self-control and perseverance, and we need them in increasing measure. I know for me, Satan would always hit me with goodness. And I'm going to share some stories in a moment that help you to see that. I would go, God, I know you can do this. I know you're powerful enough to do this, but you won't do it for me. That told me I had a problem. There was a weakness in my core. And Satan will always find your weakness. Now I want to go back to our guy Moses, and I want us to see something. Oh, I keep doing that. I'm not good with electronics. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And land, he goes on and talks about the different types of land. He says, now the cry of the Israelites have reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing you. You go, BJ, what is that saying? What does it have to do with anything? This gave me chills when God revealed this. Here you've got Moses. Moses is running away from everything in his past. But God is trying to prepare him to deliver his people. So he does this great burning bush thing to get his attention. Moses gives him his attention. He says, okay, Moses, I need you to go back and realize everything you've gone through was holy because I was teaching something. Now, before I send you to that Red Sea thing that's going to completely overwhelm you, this is something I need you to see. He said, I have heard. God uses that word. He says, I have heard them crying. I was concerned. And so I came. He needed Moses to understand, I'm about to send you somewhere that will overwhelm you. But more than anything else, I need you to know, I hear you. When you're at home and you're in bed and you're crying at night and tears are flowing, I hear you. I am concerned. And even more than that, I came to rescue you. Those are core elements. Moses was a fearful man. He was challenged by his own identity. So he was always insecure and running. He needed to know that there was a God on his side that heard him when he was afraid, that was concerned about him when he got lost in the fog, and who would come and rescue him when he lost his way. Sisters, I don't know about you. That's where I was. I was like, God, do you care? All this stuff is happening in my life. I don't understand it. Do you care? He said, BJ, I hear you. I'm concerned. I've come for you. My core was weak. Satan was shaking me up by saying, God does not care that you're hurting. It wasn't true. But because I wasn't working that muscle, I believed. And he gives him, I am with you. That's the core. Sister, if all we're standing on is faith, it says all we need is the faith the size of a mustard seed. But if that's all you're standing on, Satan's going to hit you in so many other areas. He's going to creep up behind you and beside you, and you're not going to be able to stand. So God is saying, I need you to add to your faith, baby girl. Don't just stand on one thing. That's like being a singer who can hit a high note, but that's all they do is just keep hitting high notes. At some point, you got to come down the scale. So here he is preparing to send him somewhere. But he will not send him, as we see in verse 10. So now go. After he talks about the core, after he says, this is who I am, then he says, so now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. He's saying, I'm sending you back. Why? I got work for you to do. But I first needed you to understand, I got you. I'm with you. But look at this. Moses goes to, my next book is called Stepping Out of Default Setting. Moses goes to default. Verse 11 says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God says, I love the fact that God did not even answer his question, because we immediately go, well, God, who am I? I can't do this. I'm not the person. He's like, shh, shh, shh. Stop, Moses. Stop. Get out of your default. He doesn't bother to answer the question. Instead, he pronounces, I will be with you. In other words, it's not about you, sister. It's not about what you have and what you can do. It's about me. And if you know that I am with you, you can do all things. That was God working Moses's core. He goes on and simply says, I am the I am. I look at this and I said, our core is under development, under pressure. So we've got to stop running away from pressure. A piece of coal, this nothing piece of coal, turns into a diamond by going under pressure. I look at the different parts of my life. I shared very briefly about the entertainment world because that was my world. And I look at how many times God stopped me from doing something that was going to be detrimental. Roles that would come up and I'd be like, yes, God, this is going to be great. I'm going to be a star. And God would step in and go, no. I'm like, darn it, no way. Okay, fine. And then something else would come up. And I'd be like, yes, this is it. And God would go, no. I'm like, okay, either you're mad at me, I've done something real bad. It's like I had to go to a place of trying to figure out why God would not give me what I wanted. In other words, I was throwing my own internal tantrum. But I came to realize it was God putting me under pressure. He was bringing this diamond into development, into clarity. And I'm going to share just a couple of them really quickly because I looked at my first big role in Hollywood. A lot of times you'll get the script and you're reading it and everything sounds beautiful, hunky-dory, this is wonderful. And they will change the script the day that you're about to shoot. And I had that situation. I'm working with Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker of Star Wars, for those who know who that is. We're sitting in the makeup room, and I'm in one chair, he's in another chair, getting makeup on. And the director comes in, hands us the new script. So I'm proceeding to go through the script, and I'm realizing the language has changed. All of a sudden, she's more foul-mouthed than she was when I was cast in the role. All of a sudden, there's more clothes coming off than were there before. Now I'm already in the role. I'm already booked. I'm ready to go and shoot this thing in about 45 minutes. So now I'm sitting there under pressure. God, what do I do? And Mark is sitting next to me, and I think he just noticed something changed in BJ's demeanor. That he came over, he said, "Are you okay?" And I had the courage in that moment to say, "Can I talk to you?" Now, Mark is huge. He's coming off of Star Wars. I'm nobody. And he pulls me aside. I said, "I don't think I can do this. This conflicts with everything that I stand for." And we talked a little bit. And then he says, "You know what? Let me go talk to them." He went to bat on my behalf to the producers, and they changed the script. That was the hand of God. God knew that this nobody coming on the scene didn't have that kind of power, but Mark had that kind of power. And I'm thankful to him to this day that he was willing to step in for me. But God allowed those kinds of moments to happen often. Until I finally got up to one, God kept interceding. I kept saying the hand of God was interceding. But then this last one, which I think I shared in the book, my agents, they were frustrated with me at this point. BJ had given up so many different acting roles that they were not happy with me. But this last one, he called, he said, the role is already yours. We've already signed contracts. They're messaging over the script. So I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm excited, got my tea. I'm waiting to be catapulted into stardom. This is with one of the greatest directors of all time, one of the greatest actors of all time, and I was going to be the co-actor. Everybody wanted this role, and it was given to me. I sit there with the script, and I began to open it and read it, highlight all my juicy parts, and ooh, y'all get ready, paparazzi, here I come. And then I start to realize I can't say that. I can't do that. I can't be that. So I found myself once again, which I'd found myself many times in my career, up against what God was calling me to be and what the world was offering me. And I had to make decisions. And this was the first time God didn't step in and make that decision for me. It made me think about Moses when God stood back to see what he would do. I believe that was my God moment in which he stood back. He said, "BJ, everything you want is right here. It is not what I would want, but everything you want, everything you've worked for is right here. Now I'm going to step back and see what you do." That was a restless night. That was hard. I saw dollar signs flashing in my head. I saw agents who were going to drop me. I saw all this going on. And literally it came down to this, sisters. I asked myself, I'm a daddy's girl, very much a daddy's girl. I asked myself, could I sit in a movie theater next to my dad, watch myself up on that screen and do the things they're asking me to do and be proud of it? And my answer was no. So if I could not do that with my earthly dad, I knew I couldn't do it with my Father in heaven. So I had to let it go. God has blessed me and cared for me every step of the way. But you've got to be willing to go under pressure. Lastly, I want to bring it home to those who maybe you're not so, I don't know this Moses guy, I'm not so spiritual minded. We all know Kobe. I'm a great fan of Kobe, but he showed us a rebound that just blows me away. As we know, when he tore his Achilles heel, everybody, all the naysayers went, oh, he's not going to make it back from this one. He's too old, been around too long. This is what he did. And it reminds me of what we're talking about today. He said, when I first did it, right there, I was trying to feel if the tendon is even there or if it's gone. I realized and feeling it wasn't there. I was literally trying to pull the tendon up. So hopefully I could walk and kind of just hobble through the last 2.5 minutes and try to play. So he assessed the damage. Now he did what we all tend to do, which is we try to just keep going. Even though we know we're not ourselves or we're not right, we try to keep going. He says, no. Then he did something interesting. He removed himself from the crowd. He said, I was really tired, man, just tired in the locker room. So he got away from the crowd. He says, I was upset and dejected and thinking about this mountain that I have to overcome. I mean, this is a long process. I wasn't sure I could do it. He got honest. He says, but then my kids walked in and you're like, I got to set an example. So he said, Daddy's going to be fine. I'm going to do it. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to go from there. He engaged his core. He remembered he was fighting for. Sisters, you've got to decide. You got to go back and find your reason. We all know how Kobe's story ended, his rebound. Before a world of naysayers, oh, he's too old, oh, he's too this, he rose again. And at the age of 37, scored 60 points in his final NBA game, known to this day as one of the greatest players of all time. Sisters, it comes back to us. Do you want to get well? Deuteronomy 1:6. The Lord our God said to us at Horeb, you have stayed long enough, mountain. It's time for our rebound. It is about being courageous enough to take the time out before God, shed a tear, dust yourself off, and get back in the ring to fight like you've never fought before. 2020 has knocked us all out of the ring. But I believe 2020 to be the year of perfect vision. The question is, did we catch what God was trying to show us? That was our burning bush. Did it get your attention? Did you stop? Did you go to see, God, what are you trying to show me? Because in doing that, you will find your rebound. Thank you, sisters. I so appreciate it, Jennifer and all of the Valley Church. Thank you guys for having me and allowing me the time to share.
Wow, what a powerful life sharing. Thank you so much, Cynthia, again, for giving us just an example of how God has moved in your life, and just connected to what BJ shared, right? Just the suffering that you go through, that God calls you to face that suffering. And sometimes you got to hit rock bottom, was what I'm observing, to start to face it. You run as long as you can until you have no choice, right? And then you go, okay, I have nowhere else to go. I've hit all the way on the bottom. So thank you for Cynthia and BJ, and wow, amazing. I just got teary-eyed, BJ, listening to you when you talked about Moses and how God hears us. God is concerned, and he's come to rescue. He's come to rescue us, and he's not going to give us what we want. And thank you for sharing your internal tantrums that you were having. And God, you have the power to do it, but you're not doing it for me. And there was that anger inside of you in that tantrum. But there was choices before you. Are you going to be what God called you to be versus what the world was offering you? So thank you for sharing that. God has work for you to do. right? As he has with Cynthia, right? And so thank you. Now some questions have come in and I'm gonna go there. And so one question that came is, how do you look back and not become like Lot's wife, a pillar of salt?
Well, it's understanding what you're going back in search of. Lot's wife looked back longing for what was in the past. And it wasn't going back longing for what was in the past. It was going back looking for specifically the hand of God. You cannot get lost if you're looking for the hand of God. If I'm looking for all the roles and all the other stuff I left behind, that puts me in danger of becoming Lot's wife. But if I'm looking for God's rescuing hand, it will guide me through it.
Good point. Thank you for sharing that, BJ. And I'm just wondering, BJ, when you shared about how you had those offers, right? Everything you've always wanted and you dreamed about. And you shared about how picturing sitting next to your dad, if you would be proud of that moment. What was it prior to that that helped you to stand and make a decision based on what you really believed in?
Well, there have been so many other, again, like I said, that was like the last big buildup. God was building up to that moment. God knew what was coming. I didn't know. God knew. So all the other situations that would come my way and God would step in and say no, he would always bring about something. Every role that I turned down, there was a counter role offered in which I didn't have to give up my beliefs and my convictions, but I had to trust God. For me, my core development was God constantly asking me, BJ, do you trust me? I've heard that from God throughout the course of my whole life. BJ, do you trust me? And I would say, yes, God, but. It's like, no. BJ, do you trust me? Yes, God, but. So everything that I went through, every start and stop in my career, every start and stop in just everyday life, was God stopping me and pausing and going, do you trust me? So that big moment was God asking me, show me, do you trust me? So all of those little starts and stops gave me the courage and the strength I needed to say, so, yes, God, I trust you when it really mattered. Sometimes I think we look to answer God's big question, like we're Hercules, but it's all those little ones that gives us what we need to answer the call. But we've got to answer the smaller calls along the way.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. It's like those little battles for getting
Yes.
you ready for the huge battle that was coming your way. And it was building your core. Makes sense. Thank you. All right. Another question is were there any spiritual practices that helped you to rebound?
Oh my gosh. There's one I love. It's not going to make sense to you, but I'll share it anyway. And I've shared this with my women here in Reno. It's the practice of Shabbat, Sabbath, to really stop and spend time with no one but God. So during the course of my writing this was 8 months, an 8-month journey. I got to the point where I would start my day in total silence with just me and God. I didn't pray for other people. I didn't pray for my children. It was, God, I need to feel connected to you. So I would sit in quiet or I would sit with music and I would just experience what it was like to just hold God's hand again. And when we connected, when we finally reconnected, then I could bring others in. Then I was like, okay, God, let me introduce you to my husband. And I spend time with God and my husband. Okay, let me bring you, my daughter. I would incorporate my kids, but I had gotten so accustomed to serving everyone that I had disconnected from God. And I mentioned that in the book. I say, it's unfortunate. I believe that we are churches full of disconnected Christians, not because we don't love God, but we've allowed ourselves to get disconnected. So that was the main practice, was that I would sit with God until I connected with him only. And I would not move on until I had that connection with my Father.
Wow, that is powerful. BJ, I'm wondering, how do you let go of the bitterness that, I love the analogy that you shared about the scar,
Yeah.
right? And how, right, and how it's healed. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I did a podcast for an interview with somebody, and that's exactly what he brought up. He was like, I'm hearing your story, and you've gone through so much, but I'm not hearing bitterness. How is that possible? And
Mm,
it goes back to, honestly, the answer, someone asked a question earlier. It goes back to whatever I've gone through, whatever pain, I have to attribute that to God.
mm,
So if I can reconcile with God, there is no one or nothing to be bitter and angry about. It takes away, it eliminates that in between,
mm,
you know, and that it's so easy. Again, it's so easy because so many things happen to us. It's easy to turn that onto the face of someone. But if I can go, God, you have a plan in this. This
mm,
person you chose to help push me to where you're trying to take me next. It's just kind of a side note, when we moved to Reno, it was a hard move.
mm,
It wasn't a smooth sailing. And I reached that, BJ, do you trust me? Point with God. I was like, yeah, God, I got to pay the bills. Time's ticking. What's going on? I
mm,
didn't see what was ahead of me. So I was angry. I was blaming other people for the reason I'm in the situation I'm in. But now I look at it. I look at these beautiful, beautiful kids that God has given me to serve. And I realized God was pushing me here. I would not have come on my own. I don't know. I didn't know where Reno was. Never even, well, I'd heard of it, but I couldn't have found it on a map. I knew nothing about Reno. So I would not have chosen to come here on my own, but God had a plan. But in order to get Bijou to do it, he had to push her out where she wanted to be into where he wanted her to be. When I see
mm,
it that way, I can embrace it. And it takes away, again, any anger, frustration, bitterness that I can tie to people. And I
mm,
can go, God, you are powerful and you are mighty. You really do
mm.
know what you're doing if I get out of
That's so true. All right, we'll do one more question. It
the
says,
way.
how do we become aware of the subtle lie from Satan that God is good, but maybe not good to us?
I think I don't know about how do we become aware of it. I think we already know. That I think goes back to being honest with ourselves and
Mm,
having other people that can be honest with us and for us when we are not honest ourselves. It shows up in the slightest ways. You know, no, I can't do. No, I don't want that. You can have that. It's just not. I'm good. We have these two dreadful words that I call I'm fine.
mm,
Someone asks, "How are you doing?" I'm fine. What can I do
mm,
for you? I'm fine. That tells me I'm not trusting that God's gonna take care of me. So instead of putting myself out there like that, God, I'm fine. I'm just gonna, I'm okay. So again, it shows up in the slightest ways, but because we've lived it, walked in it for so long, it's
mm,
hard for us to recognize. We need someone else to go, you're not fine.
mm,
There's a dream in your heart that you've covered up. You don't even want to even visit it anymore.
mm,
That's that scar. You brush up against it. If I want a
mhm,
baby, I always wanted a baby and never could have a baby. And I
mm,
bristle every time someone shows up with a newborn. But I'm fine.
mm,
Let me hold the baby. We camouflage it, we hide it. And God is saying, bring it to me real.
mm.
I can't heal you until you're honest.
Wow. Thank you for reminding us of that, right? It's being honest. And I love how you just said we have dreams that we've covered.
Mhm.
And in order to regain that, you got to be honest and vulnerable and real. with God, and then reconcile with him with that support team around you. Because we can't do it on our own.
I tried it, doesn't work.
I tried it too. I hear you. BJ, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Wow. I see a lot of people in the chat are ready to go buy your book, girl.
Oh.
And we still have 7 more books that we're giving out today.
Yeah.
But BJ, we love you. Every single woman on this call, I truly believe, has been changed, has been called higher to really look at those sufferings, whatever we're going through, and go to those scary places and know that God is leading us to our destiny if we're willing to go there and to build our core. So thanks again, BJ.
You're
we love
welcome.
You so
Thank you,
much.
Valley Church. I'm so delighted. Thank you, guys.
Amen. Thank you.